going live now with AJ Erskine of Bevan's Oyster Company of the Virginia Seafood Council, a now regular guest on the John Fredericks Radio program. AJ, thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Good morning, Mike. It's great to be with you. Thank you.
Of course. So tell me what we have going on in Virginia seafood. We have the 4th of July coming up, barbecues aplenty. What's going on in your industry?
Well, the seafood industry was impacted economically from, the pandemic, and we're happy to kind of report that markets are returning slowly, but certainly they are returning. The July 4 weekend is a big weekend for seafood, particularly shellfish in Virginia, and we're excited for, what's coming up.
As you should be. So I wanted to, Americans rely on seafood, whether that's their crab cakes from Maryland, their shrimp from Texas or Alabama, salmon from Alaska, crawfish from Louisiana, oysters from Virginia. The president recently went to Maine and opened up waters outside of on the coast of Maine. And then I know that he also met with lobstermen recently. So can you walk me through exactly why the president is, in a re-election year, working so tirelessly to speak to and try to help the seafood industry? And then I know we just got to dive into this H-2B problem. So walk me through exactly what we have going on.
Yeah, so Mike, it's interesting. What we've seen is, this administration and the president support this seafood industry in the United States as a manufacturer, and understanding that we have economic challenges with imported seafood. We compete strongly as far as a valuable and safe product in the United States that we have, in particular lobsters. So my understanding when he traveled up there, as you said, to relax some of the Marine National Monument areas, he also met with representatives in the lobster industry and made them economically competitive, in particular with some of the tariffs that were imposed. And I think it's a terrific effort on the administration's part to support one of our most storied industries that we have in this country. Unfortunately, in the seafood industry, it falls short of addressing the true need, which is in processing. Seafood processing is our temporary seasonal labor need.
So there is a economic side to this, right? By accounting that I've read, the U.S. seafood manufacturing accounts for billions of dollars annually in economic revenue and tens of thousands of jobs, which, as we all know, if you listen to Dave Bratt or any other good economist, Larry Kudlow, there is a massive ripple effect. So I'm looking at, in front of me, a 2011 study. The Virginia seafood industry reeled in over $400 million and supported thousands of Virginians. Looking at Louisiana, we had our friend Attorney General Jeff Landry on the show 2 weeks ago. 1 in every 70 jobs are related to the seafood industry. That's $2.4 billion annually. Alaska, $5.6 billion annually from just the economic activity of the seafood industry. So if we don't want the seafood industry to go away, what can we do? How can we best support? How can the Trump administration, and how should they support you, right? Is it dive into this H-2B visa program and why it has to be fixed for us?
Well, so Mike, you speak to the economics of it. It's a profound argument that we have billions of dollars at stake and tens of thousands of jobs. And when you talk about that, that's direct impact. When you talk about multipliers, the box companies that supply us, the bait industries, all these ancillary industries that we support in the seafood market, it's unbelievable the number of jobs and the economics that are driven in this country by domestic seafood. The piece we lack, the one thing we're talking about, is seasonal labor. And these seasons aren't just arbitrarily defined. These are defined by state and federal regulations. Our season begins when the harvest is allowed to begin by state and federal regulations. So we have harvest quotas. We have gear restrictions. There are a lot of regulations around this industry. What we lack is a seasonal visa program where we can get labor in to process seafood. We're manufacturers, so we're a domestic production engine.
But you're not labeled a manufacturer when it comes to what I mean. If for our listeners, an H-2B visa is not a manufacturing visa. It's not the same thing, right? You're in the seasonal
Correct.
labor pool, which is what many landscapers use. But there's a big difference. You're creating something. You are taking something out there. You are manufacturing it and putting it on my table so that I can eat 25 oysters, right? That's probably actually a low number. 36 oysters.
This is fundamentally different than what we're talking about. We as a seafood industry have utilized this visa program, H-2B, for over 20 years. And unfortunately, we are lumped in with a number of service industries, landscapers, hotels, and others that do not manufacture a product. So we are taking something, transforming it, an all-natural, domestic, certified product that goes on your dinner table or into your restaurant. So we are fundamentally different when we look at a production manufacturer-based versus the program we're in, which is H-2B. H-2B is a non-agricultural visa program. So it's part and parcel different than H-2A, which is the agricultural visa. So we're non-agriculture. We truly, to be honest with you, and so your listeners understand, we need a program that is going to work for manufacturers. If there were a manufacturer's visa out there, terrific. That'd be great. If there were a seafood visa out there, we would be appropriately categorized. But we're not. So we fall into this. For a very few number of visas that we use annually, we're lumped into a large pool of non-agricultural, non-manufacturing visas when we're a manufacturer.
Which is, this is classic government. The government puts statutes on you when you can go out and fish, how you can fish, how you can, procure this seafood from the sea. But they also then limit you statutorily as to how and who can help you manufacture said seafood once you get it out. And I just want to remind our listeners, if businesses like AJ's and the ones that we rely on, I happen to love the restaurant Rappahannock in downtown Richmond. If they're not able to get oysters, they come in from places that we don't want to eat oysters from. AJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking Venezuela, Vietnam. I know that Korea also sends us a lot of oysters. I mean, walk me through that. Where is seafood going to come from if your market share is diminished because statutorily these visas are not given?
Well, I mean, probably the most striking example is in the picked crab meat industry. So here locally in Chesapeake Bay, Maryland and Virginia pick blue crabs, and they're straight out of the Chesapeake Bay. And they utilize the seasonal labor to pick those crabs. And if we don't have those crab pickers and processors, the next airport shipment is coming from Venezuela overnight, and that will be imported product. Keep in mind that it's inspected less frequently than our own product here domestically.
Naturally.
So here we are in a situation where we're inadvertently, I believe, promoting imported seafood, and we have the resource. The great story, Mike, and I want your listeners to understand, is we have the resource. We have the markets.
Mm-hmm.
What we do not have is this seasonal labor need. And I also want people to understand that we have been at this for over 2 decades, quite honestly, since the mid-'90s in this program fighting seasonal labor needs. And our processing has changed. The labor pool has changed. They've aged out. We no longer have local crab pickers and oyster shuckers, so we've had to be sucked into this program. Previous administrations have failed us. And now we come to an administration that was strongly supported by the seafood industry, and we're being left behind. We're being left out. The president's executive order for seafood economic competitiveness is terrific.
Mm-hmm.
What he did for the lobster industry, terrific. But we're nibbling around the edges on this seasonal labor need issue. And if we don't get at the heart of it, we are going to have businesses that have closed. In fact, there are businesses in all of these states. I'm coming to you from Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
But this same story is in Alaska, it's in Texas, it's in Louisiana, it's in Maryland, it's all over this country. And there are processing U.S. domestic seafood manufacturers of crab meat, oysters, shrimp, you name it, and they're closed right now because they don't have seasonal visas to be able to process this domestic seafood.
And you can't take back market share that is, essentially gifted away, right? This is not an industry that comes back. If we're on the brink now, you do not come back from the brink.
No, we really don't. Those markets get sucked up by foreign imports. That's just the reality of it. And quite honestly, in the seafood manufacturing industry, the profit margin is slim and it's difficult to maintain. So yeah, these are aging plants that were built a number of decades ago, and they have to be updated according to state and federal regulations. You're producing food products, so of course we adhere to Food and Drug Administration standards in our local health departments, obviously. So we have to have buildings that are up to code, and we continue to improve those facilities. But how far can you go if you don't have the labor to come in and process the product? You're done.
I couldn't agree more. Now, let's talk about, in the last 2 minutes that we have here, what's the fix? President Donald J. Trump, A.J. Erskine is literally pleading with you over the radio. What is the fix, AJ? Speak to the man.
Well, Mike, I mentioned that previous administrations have failed us, and Congress has failed us. There's a statutory cap that's in the H-2B program, and we're the only manufacturers in the program. We've been through that. But the fix, in my opinion, is if the president would come out and issue an executive order or modify his executive order to say that for U.S. manufacturers within the H-2B program, your visas do not count against the cap. Therefore, we don't compete against these service industries that want a significantly higher number of visas, that our number of visas, relatively small number, would be exempt from that cap. Furthermore, what could happen in Congress, and there is a piece of legislation to do this, is to exempt the seafood industry from counting against the cap. That's in law. We could develop a seafood visa or a manufacturing visa. Mm-hmm. Those are all tangible, solutions to this real problem. And right. This problem, like I said, has been with us for a number of years. I believe this administration has the strength to be able to come up with a solution.
Talk to me about timeline. So you have a minute left, AJ. I think we hopefully were able to cover enough ground for our listeners to be well educated on this. I mean, call the White House switchboard, email the White House. This is a very important issue. But AJ, what's your timeline? How can my Maryland crab people, my Virginia oysters, how much longer do they have?
Mike, I really appreciate your time and bringing this to the listeners. It's absolutely vital to what we do as our seasonal labor, and unfortunately, that time has passed. I'll be quite honest with you. There are 6 Maryland crab picking plants that are closed, lights out, doors closed. Crabs are out there. There are watermen catching crabs. What are the watermen supposed to do? There's no place to pick that crab. So we have plants in Virginia, and as I said, it's all around the country, the same story, that are closed, that are lights out, and they will not be producing picked crab meat, crab cakes. They won't be making those. So our time is now. And I plead with all the listeners and the administration and the president, please solve this problem for the seafood industry. We are a manufacturer. We know that we are supported by you all. You want to support manufacturing, domestic production, and we are the ones that need to be supported.
Well, that was an impassioned plea. Thank you so much, AJ, for joining.